In June of 2001, Archie Comics released Sonic the Hedgehog number 98, which was a tie-in to Sonic Adventure 2. As opposed to what they did with the first Sonic Adventure, where they adapted and adjusted the events of the game to fit perfectly into the universe of the comics, issue 98 is closer to acting as expanded material. The ending of issue 97 sets up the events of Sonic's arrest, with it explicitly stating that what comes next is Sonic Adventure 2. The first story of issue 98 then primarily covers events we don't see in the game, such as Eggman discovering his grandfather's diary, Shadow's theft of the Chaos Emerald from the Federal Reserve Bank, how Sonic ended up being mistaken for Shadow, and of course the details of Sonic's arrest. After this, they do an almost word-for-word adaptation of the opening cutscene of the hero's story.
Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies, I'm out of here. I like running better.
This is then followed by segments covering different portions of City Escape to the point where you can tell what areas inspired each panel. The story ends with Sonic being chased by the gun truck, and a narration box saying that the only way to see how this story concludes is to play Sonic Adventure 2, implying the events of the game occur as they normally would. Put a pin in that, we'll get back to it. The B story of this issue, titled As the Shadow Awakes, is a more objective telling of Shadow's backstory. In Adventure 2, every scene with Maria is framed as a flashback from Shadow's perspective. We know his memories had been tampered with, but even if they hadn't been, we would still only be getting his view of the events. This version isn't told from any one perspective. Plus, I gotta have a little respect for them murking Maria on panel, making this probably one of the first pieces of Sonic media to give her an on-screen death. And then they decided to run it back 2 more times. Once in issue 124, and then in 158. Even Shadow's spin-off game chickened out of keeping that in the final release. After we see Gerald being taken to his execution, the comic once again urges the reader to check out Adventure 2 to discover more of the story. In theory, I think issue 98 is the platonic ideal of what a tie-in comic for a Sonic game should be. Its primary goal is not to take the place of the game's events, but expand upon them. In fact, I think this is pretty much the model that a lot of tie-in books have followed. A lot of the more interesting events relating to Sonic Forces are in the 4-part prequel comic, Frontiers has a prologue comic, Sonic Superstars not only has a digital comic clarifying how Fang met Trip, but also the IDW Fang miniseries is framed as expanded material as well, as its ending establishes that Superstars takes place right after it ends. Yes, ultimately they are ads, but at the same time, they are enhancements to the main material, and in some cases can still stand on their own as a narrative. However, with issue 98, there are a few problems with that. There are some minor issues. The early timeline is shuffled around quite a bit. The events of Iron Gate definitely happen differently. While those are things I can shrug at as changes that don't make a whole lot of difference or can be ignored, what makes the implication that the game perfectly fills the space between issues 98 and 99 is what central characters were already doing. While Archie's Sonic Adventure adaptation changes a fair bit to make it fit its current world, it does do everything it can to make sure characters who are important to the story are there to participate in it. By contrast, Sonic is the only one who gets set up to participate in Adventure 2. To the credit of the team at Archie, they seem to realize this as early as issue 99, and of course 8 years later, Sonic Universe number 2 would clarify a portion of how Adventure 2 transpired in the pre-reboot timeline. But I felt this was a fun opportunity to talk about what characters were doing at the time and why Adventure 2 can't occur as is. And we're gonna start with...
You don't have enough memory in the memory card.
Technically, Eggman does participate in Archie's version of Adventure 2, but it's evident his role is pretty different. The first thing that probably sticks out to those familiar with Archie's version of Robotnik is just how evil he is. While the game's version of Eggman is, of course, capable of cruelty, he does try to kill Sonic in the vacuum of space. Some might find it more difficult to believe that Archie's Eggman would try to help save Mobius. For context, at this point in the comic, Eggman is not the original Robotnik of this universe, but a version from a universe where he already killed Sonic, and came to this one because he just wanted to do it again. That being said, I actually don't think this is a problem. Sonic and Eggman do call truces with one another later, and I could see him acting more out of self-preservation. In Sonic Universe number 2, when the arc is heading towards Mobius, there is a speech bubble that could be him. It could also be Rouge based on a previous speech bubble, but he is the one to say the equivalent of this line in the game, and it's written more like Eggman dialogue than Rouge dialogue, so I do assume it's him. No, the thing that I don't think happens is Eggman's ultimatum to the world. At least not in this way. In issue 92, a group of overlanders who fled the planet after the Great War, including Robotnik's brother Colin and his family, return to Mobius. The overlanders are distrustful of all the Mobians, leading Eggman to trick them into thinking of him as a hero. Sonic tries to explain that he's lying, but Monkey Khan ends up taking out his frustrations on Robotropolis, making all the overlanders so frightened, they run to the perceived safety Robotnik's providing, with him immediately turning on the energy dome to protect the city afterwards. Despite the fact that in the end he is planning on just roboticizing all of them, the Doctor still goes to great lengths to keep up this facade, from transforming Robotropolis into more of a livable city, albeit with heavy restrictions, and defending his new citizens from an enraged Kodos. He still certainly is cruel, but he doesn't do anything that could ruin his adoration. In fact, until he's found out in issue 105, he doesn't take any direct action against the Freedom Fighters or Knothole Village. There's a genuine chance he never left the city, and every part we know he had to play, like setting bombs on Prison Island, could have been done remotely. In issue 106, Sally has to explain who Eggman is to the President, so that means he probably never received the Doctor's ultimatum. Also, issue 105 features a scene that's very aesthetically similar to the Day X scene, so I think this sort of takes the place of it.
And I said that's disgusting!
So basically, he is involved, but his role has to be much different. But let's move on to someone who can't be involved at all with...
Just wait a minute!
Despite not being playable in the story mode, Amy's pretty important to Adventure 2's story, and if you think she wasn't, you weren't paying attention. She gets to Prison Island on her own to help free Sonic. While she and Tails do work together to break in, she is the one to break him out of his cell, and she's also the one who ultimately gets through to Shadow. She doesn't get to do a lot, but most of what she does is so pivotal it has to be preserved in some form in adaptation. I don't want to talk about this, but Amy, unfortunately, is not around when this happens. While she returns from Station Square with the rest of the Freedom Fighters in issue 88, she leaves the same issue after Antoine and Bunny reveal they're going to the Kingdom of Mercia to confront Antoine's roboticized father. Amy feels that she has to help them since she was born there and her cousin Robbo the Hedge is still there. They all leave with Sally's blessing, but girl is really going through it this issue. She ends up taking part in a multi-issue adventure with Antoine, Bunny, Rob, and Knuckles to the Echidna city of Albion, where they attempt to find Antoine's father. When they eventually subdue him, the local echidnas want to destroy him, but Knuckles, who had entered his chaos form, saves the day by warping Antoine, his father, and Bunny to their transport, and also Amy and Rob back to Mercia. Amy is then just not around for a while. Like, she appears in the tie-in for Sonic Shuffle, which is a dream, and also in glimpses of alternate realities in issue 101, but Amy doesn't actually return to Knothole Village until issue 111. Assuming issue 88 takes place right after Adventure, this means, in-universe, she'd been gone for over 3 months. In real-world publication time, she hadn't played a major role in about 2 years. It's rough being an Amy fan sometimes. Besides Adventure 2, here's a list of everything she missed in that time. Uncle Chuck and Mutsky regaining their free will. Sally's mother waking from a coma, which she should have probably been there for given past events. Sally's father getting paralyzed. The Overlanders returning from space. Sonic being forced to attend high school. Nate Morgan dying. The Overlanders moving to Knothole. The original Robotnik returning. Robotropolis exploding. And relationship drama. Because she's gone when Adventure 2 would take place, in Sonic Universe number 2, her role is filled by Rouge finding a video that Shadow, quote, needs to see. I don't think it's Gerald's execution video because that ain't convincing nobody to save the world. I think it's something more akin to the recording of Gerald and Maria at the end of Shadow the Hedgehog. We never see what it is, but Shadow figures out what his promise to Maria really was. Issue 124 also states that Sonic helped him see the light too. Treasure Team Tango, my favorite Sonic arc, does make up for this by giving Amy an equivalent moment, but I also like viewing that as complementary to her moment in Adventure 2, so you know, I still find myself missing it. But who's next?
Oh no!
During the events of Adventure 2, Knuckles was green.
That thing's green!
So due to his father microwaving him with chaos energy, Knuckles is able to achieve a form known as Chaos Knuckles, which makes him the equivalent of a living Chaos Emerald. He first taps into this form in issue 90 while doing battle with Antoine's roboticized father. frightening the Echidna of Albion. While Knuckles manages to teleport himself and his friends away, the residents of Albion don't intend to leave him alone, both hiring mercenaries either to capture or end him, or creating technology in an attempt to further depower him. Knuckles would stay in this form for quite some time, only seemingly dropping out of it briefly in issue 91, and even then, from the dialogue, it seems more likely they just forgot to color him green here. If this was just a minor aesthetic change, I could maybe excuse it, and think the events could be transpiring as normal. He's just green, but he did gain a lot of power at this point. In fact, very early on, he tries to manipulate the entirety of reality via time travel. This happens after Archie's Adventure 2 equivalent, but even before that, he's still very aware of how strong he's become. He also does go crazy for a little bit, so maybe he wouldn't be as cooperative with the plot. Knuckles would stay this way until he dies in issue 118, and even then, he's still green floating around the afterlife. He only returns to his red hue after being resurrected in issue 125 to help save Mobius, as his resurrection stripped him of his chaos powers. Interestingly, in the off-panel comic for Sonic Universe number 2, Knuckles complains about being left out of Archie's version of the story. Side note, they also joke about the fact that it took 8 years to properly give Adventure 2 a full adaptation, and that it'll probably be another year before they get to Sonic Heroes. Which, it's not a full adaptation, but it would actually take until 2017 post-reboot to reference the events of Heroes directly. The one difficulty in Knuckles not being involved at all is Rouge's early appearances. See, when Bowlers was writing, the dialogue suggests the two have more of an existing relationship, and from Bowler's plans, we know he was planning to expand upon this further. Because Sonic spent a year in space, it is possible to presume something resembling their Adventure 2 interactions occurred in that time period, but as for whether that was going to be the intention, we won't know the full scope of Bowler's plan since he had left the book. Whether intentionally or not, the way Ken wrote Rouge in issue 150 is more aligned with the two having very little interaction, as she doesn't know about the gems on Angel Island until she overhears Fang. This would leave issue 165 as the two's first real conversation, with their previous interactions in 125, 132, and 133 as being just a bit overly familiar. And with that, let's continue to...
Wow, my head's spinning!
Tails is an interesting case because there was a bit of a chance to argue he did participate in Archie's version of Adventure 2. While issue 99 establishes the little Knuckles-centric adventure he goes on from issues 94 to 97 takes place at roughly the same time as Adventure 2, he does return home with Sonic, meaning that he could have joined partway through the story much like how he does in the game. He's also one of the first to recognize Shadow after he returns. So maybe he was there. The issue is, during that time, Tails wasn't real. Let me explain. Remember that Knuckles-centric adventure I mentioned? Well, in issue 94, Knuckles' ghostly great-grandfather, if you've seen Sonic Underground, you know him, Athair, transports Tails away as he needs his help. Knuckles, who had changed into his Chaos form, was being driven mad by the power, leaving a path of destruction in his wake. Athair gets Tails' Uncle Merlin to transform the fox into his Turbo form, thinking he would be able to stand up to Knuckles' power and, as his friend, be able to talk him through his problems. However, the two begin to fight anyway, with Tails easily being taken down. This confuses both Merlin and Athair, as they know Turbo Tails should have had more than enough power to deal with Knuckles. But they discover that this is not Tails at all, but a doppelganger. Uncertain what happened to the real Tails, or if he's even still alive, the two decide to let the clone continue believing he's the genuine article until they figure out what happened to the real one, with the fake Tails sticking around until issue 114, meaning the comic had a fake Tails for over a year. Did this bit for Amy, but let's see some of the important things Tails missed. Nate Morgan dying, no one was here for his death. The Overlanders coming to Knothole, the original Robotnik returning, and Robotropolis exploding. As you can see, there's a fair amount of overlap. It's almost like while there is a lot happening in this time period, it leaves a very minute effect on a large portion of the cast. In issue 114, after being afflicted with a repeating nightmare of a cave, the fake Tails decides to track it down, thinking it to be a prophetic vision. Sonic, seeing his best pal leaving, decides to follow after him. When the two arrive, they discover Tails, still in his turbo form, sitting in a force field. The kidnapper then reveals themselves. Mammoth Mammoth Mogul, who Tails had foiled before, captured the fox while Athair was transporting him, replacing him with a double. Mogul had been keeping the fox in his turbo form for months, draining his energy to replenish his own. Sonic immediately goes to fight him, while the fake Tails has an identity crisis. Funny thing is, these lines are pretty similar to things Shadow says in Adventure 2. The fake Tails says that his memories still feel real, and when Mogul is about to obliterate Sonic, the doppelganger attacks his creator, making Mogul lose concentration, freeing the real Tails from the force field and causing the mammoth to disappear. Sonic is confused as to why the fake Tails is crying, to which he replies that he's just a fake. Sonic reassures him that he's not, he's his best bud. The fake Tails says he'll never forget Sonic before evaporating in front of the hedgehog. The real Tails awakens, confused as to what happened and where he is, with Sonic telling him he's right here. So sometimes in stories like this, they'll magic the doppelganger's memories into the original's head so they can sort of live on. They don't do that here. Tails is just missing a portion of his life that Sonic had to summarize for him. The real issue, if we just pretend the entirety of Adventure 2 happened, is that it robs Tails of the moment when he stands up for himself. The moment is the reaffirmation of his adventure arc. The central theme of his story and adventure is to grow to be a hero like Sonic. So when he says that Sonic asked him for the first time to do something for him, it's him getting confirmation that Sonic recognizes his growth. It works as a scene because while Tails thinks he just witnessed his best friend explode, the last thing Sonic said to him was recognition of how far he's come. So if this is the fake Tails, that kinda sucks. That all being said, Tails' journey of self-actualization isn't in Archie's adventure adaptation anyway. So regardless, this scene wouldn't have worked. Really, there's just no point for him to be there, because he's not gonna remember the events anyway. If the doppelganger found out he was a fake earlier, I think you could have done something interesting with him and Shadow. As for how Tails recognized Shadow in issue 124, I can explain that away by the fact that he might have just seen a picture of him or Sonic had described him. Next, we gotta talk about...
Look! Half of the moon is gone?
So, did they blow up the moon? Feels like this should be a pretty easy question to answer, which I have deeply overcomplicated. Even in the games, the moon is depicted with very little consistency. They've come up with explanations as to why this is, but the real life reasons are probably either they forgot or they thought it would be a better visual with a full moon, which they're usually right about anyway. And when the broken moon is the better visual, they use it. Now, for the games, we know they blew up the moon because, well, we saw it happen. How do we determine for ourselves if it happened in the comics? Well, there's probably a better way, but starting from issue 99, I went through every issue until the first Mega Man crossover and listed out every appearance of the moon, as well as whether it was broken or not. Between the main series and Sonic Universe, that is 198 issues. I forgot to check the free comic book day specials, but I kinda don't want to do that now. While doing this, I felt myself slowly start to become one of those fans as I grew irritated about the moon's phases being slightly different between panels.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
I don't want to become that again. Being that the games forget about the moon too, the level of proof I'm just looking for is them referencing it occasionally and it not being completely forgotten about. I also ran into a problem in that I don't know if the moon can still be a crescent when it's like this, but if we see the shadow of the whole moon, we'll say it's unbroken. We're off to a poor start as the first time we see the moon after issue 98 is in issue 111, and in that one it is not broken. It's also not broken in issue 118, 120, and 123. Fittingly, the first appearance of the broken moon is in issue 124 when Shadow returns to the comic, and it stays broken in issue 125. Sonic's off-planet for a bit, but when he returns to Mobius in issue 129, it's still broken. So there we go, moon was blown up. Except, they forget about it after this. For the next 9 years, the moon is no longer broken. There is a panel in issue 192 where it looks broken, but it could easily be a weird cloud over it, and in a later panel, it's full. So, can't really say definitively. It looks like they might have forgot about it, or maybe they just decided it didn't happen, is what I would say if we didn't get one more broken moon appearance in 2012 Sonic Universe number 41. Yes, the wrong side of it is broken when you compare it to earlier issues, and issue 44, part of the same arc, features a crescent that should not be possible with the way it was dented, but this happens in very close proximity to the end of the pre-reboot timeline. So the team at Archie clearly remembered and just decided to remind us, hey, it happened. So yes, they blew up the moon.
Revenge!
So with all that out of the way, how does Adventure 2 happen in the pre-reboot timeline? We are going to use all available sources plus everything that we figured out. Around 50 years ago, aboard the space colony Ark, Shadow the Hedgehog is created by Professor Gerald Robotnik, not only to cure Maria's neuroimmune deficiency syndrome, or NIDS, but also in an attempt to conquer both disease and even death. He first creates the Bio-Lizard before moving on to creating Shadow. The professor specifically mentions Mobian DNA plays a key part in his research, and it is later revealed that Black Doom was also involved as well. As Gerald's research reaches its completion, the military arrives at the space colony, believing that they should be in charge of Project Shadow. While the soldiers initially state that Gerald and Maria are the only ones aboard the Ark, later material fills in that there were others aboard, including Abraham Tower, whose connection to Maria is the same as it is in the games. Gerald worries the Hedgehog is still too unstable in his current condition for this interference, and has Shadow and Maria head to the escape pod. Maria is shot, and Shadow is launched toward Mobius. Gerald is brought into custody and forced to continue his work on Prison Island, and the military also quickly finds and recovers Shadow. After hearing of Maria's death, Gerald begins to plan his revenge, altering Shadow's mind to ensure he will attempt to destroy the world with the Eclipse Cannon. The military suspects he's up to something but can't figure out what it may be, so they elect to just shelve the project and execute him. There are some contentious elements of this, as it seems like Shadow and Maria only have known each other for maybe an hour before she dies, but other material refers to Maria as his dearest friend, and the two definitely display a deeper connection. So we can maybe fudge the timeline a little bit and say that maybe they've known each other for a little bit longer than that. In the aftermath of Archie's Sonic Adventure adaptation, Silver Sonic is reprogrammed to be the protector of Station Square, chasing Eggman out of town. Unfortunately for the Doctor, the robot is very persistent, and manages to chase the villain all the way to Prison Island. Eggman manages to escape after falling into an abandoned lab, where he both discovers Gerald's diary and Shadow. Eggman decides this is the perfect chance to both take over Station Square and get rid of Sonic, but he decides he needs to spend some time on the plan. 3 months pass, and the Doctor eventually unleashes Shadow, whose first goal is to steal a Chaos Emerald from a bank in Station Square. Silver Sonic attempts to stop him, but is quickly destroyed. After the bank's surveillance tapes are reviewed and passed on to the President, knowing of only one fast hedgehog at this point, it's assumed it must be Sonic. The President hires Rouge to retrieve the gem and looks to get Sonic arrested. And then a week passes. I'm assuming this week is when the moon gets blown up. Now, we do see the moon a few times in the lead up to issue 98, but I think this is the best place to put it because, well, here's where things get rough. Issue 99 pretty much states that all of issue 97 and Adventure 2 take place over a 24-hour period at most. And if you remember, the game itself plays out over 3 to 4 days. I'm going to be generous and give these events those full 24 hours to play out. Having earlier been stripped of his knighthood and ordered not to leave Knothole Village, Sonic decides to adopt the superhero persona of Sneak and continue his battle against Eggman. He sneaks out, and after rescuing the Secret Service, he returns home and stashes his costume, only to be arrested by the military group Sigma Alpha 2. While over Station Square, I assume, Sonic breaks free and city escape happens. At some point later, still in the city, Sonic faces off with Shadow, which we know because the President has footage of their fight in issue 106, and all their other footage is of fights that happen in Station Square. At some point their fight ends and Sonic tracks Shadow to Prison Island, which we know isn't that far from Station Square since Eggman was chased there. While the two fight, it's revealed Rouge has teamed up with Shadow and is working on procuring 6 more Chaos Emeralds from the vault on the base. It's also revealed that Eggman is there and has set the charges to blow up in 5 minutes, just as Rouge gets stuck in the vault. While Eggman is content just letting Rouge die, Sonic offers to help Shadow save the bat. Once all inside, Shadow teleports them all to Eggman's pyramid base, before teleporting away with all the emeralds. This leaves Sonic and Rouge a chance to talk, and the two agree to work together to stop Shadow and the Doctor, taking the spaceship and Eggman's base right to the Ark. Sonic and Shadow fight on the way to the Eclipse Cannon, but right as it looks like the ultimate life form is about to send the fastest thing alive back to the title screen, Rouge radios in, stating she found a video Shadow needs to see. Some combination of this video and Sonic's own words make Shadow switch sides. Like the game, the two are confronted by the Bio Lizard, which fuses with the Ark, and attempts to steer it toward the planet. The two hedgehogs go super in an attempt to stop it, Shadow giving his life in the process, plummeting towards Mobius. What's different here is that he's rescued from his free fall when an alien species known as the Bem transport him and restore him back to health, awakening him from stasis much later when they need him to do battle with a new threat. And that's the pre-reboot version of Adventure 2. So, Adventure 2 in the pre-reboot Archie timeline is pretty rough, and it's sort of clear why they neglect to show a lot of it. It has to be a stripped down version of the game, which takes away a lot of the story elements that people love. So in a lot of ways, it was best to just let fans presume the events that occurred. While Sonic Universe number 2 certainly cemented the idea that Adventure 2 happened differently from the game, there were already traces of that long before. And I think Sonic Universe number 2 does do a good job in juxtaposing current events to Adventure 2 flashbacks to highlight Sonic and Shadow's dynamic. I like it, even though I think it's not as good as the game. Now, would it have been better if we had just gotten a full adaptation like we did with Adventure? I actually don't think so. Again, all the characters were in the middle of a lot. Adventure 2 and issue 98 came out in 2001, Amy would not return and Tails would not be real until 2002, and Knuckles wouldn't stop being green until 2003. Of course, a full adaptation would have massively restructured the story at this time, but some of these things were already happening and couldn't be easily changed. On top of that, I don't think anyone's characters would really benefit from being in Archie's version of Adventure 2. Amy and Tails' stories were already minimized in the Adventure adaptation, so it would probably be the same here. Rouge would end up being tied to a lot of existing Echidna lore, plus because Julie Sue already existed, I think some of the things I talked about in the Rouge video would only be worse. And on top of all that, you'd have to find stuff for the rest of the Freedom Fighters to do, or they'd just be standing around. In the long run, I do think what we got is the best way it would have existed at the time. I'm sure there's some fan rewrites out there that, with the benefit of hindsight, find a way to fit a faithful Adventure 2 retelling into the universe, but we got what we got. Like I've said many times, I love the chaotic nature of Pre-Reboot Archie. While they didn't always present something that was narratively sound, I still feel like I got something out of it. They did squish down one of my favorite stories the Sonic franchise has to offer, but I also got to talk about some weird stories that happened around it, so I can't really be mad at that. Thank you all so much for watching. I want to thank all my patrons and give a special shout out to my $5 patrons, Ned Rex, Nate DM990, Diddly Do, and Queer Kaiju. See y'all in the next video.